They just change the rules without telling you. Not on paper, not with a headline. They change them at the grocery checkout, in the rent renewal email, and in the interest rate buried in your credit card statement. And if you don't see it now, you will feel it later. Because the real story isn't a recession might come. The real story is that millions of families are already in a silent recession right now, while the official numbers keep pretending we're fine. Here's what happened. In less than 3 years, the average household went from a small emergency is annoying to a small emergency is a crisis. Savings dried up, debt got heavier, prices refused to come back down, the financial air got thin. That is the event. That is the shift. And it's why 2027 isn't a random year on a calendar. It's the year the math stops cooperating. I'm Jon AG, and you're watching The Currency Academy by Jon AG. Now let's break down the chain reaction, and the mainstream won't connect for you. First domino, the buffer is gone. Most people don't have breathing room anymore. I don't have much. I mean the kind of buffer that turns a flat tire into a mild inconvenience, the kind of cushion that lets you sleep at night. Without it, your life becomes a daily game of avoiding one bad surprise. And here's the cruelest part. Even when you do everything right, the system can still move the goalposts. Your raise arrives, but rent rises first. Your bonus hits, but insurance eats it. You earn more, yet you feel poorer because the ladder is on an escalator going down faster than you climb. Second domino, the cost of borrowing exploded. This is the part people underestimate. Debt used to be slow. Now debt is fast. You miss a payment and the penalty multiplies. You carry a balance and the interest doesn't add a little. It compounds like a machine designed to drain you. Third domino, necessities became non-negotiable. You can cancel Netflix. You can skip a vacation. But you can't cancel groceries. You can't cancel rent. You can't cancel electricity. And when the non-negotiables climb faster than your income, you don't need a major disaster. You just need time. So let me hit you with a real question. If your car breaks tomorrow, do you fix it with cash or do you finance the problem? And second question for the comments. What hit you hardest in the last 12 months? Groceries, rent, insurance, utilities, or medical? Answer it honestly. I want to see the pattern across this community. Now, quick thing before we go deeper. If you're here for original analysis and you're tired of the copy-paste channels, subscribe to support the work. And if you're part of the movement against copycats, comment Jon AG best so I can see you. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells the algorithm you want truth, not noise. All right, let's talk about why this is happening and why so many people feel like they're working harder but getting poorer. Most people think the crisis is one big monster. A crash, a collapse, a single headline event. That's Hollywood. Real financial collapse is quieter. It's death by 1,000, it's fine moments. Your insurance goes up, you shrug. Your rent bumps again, you adjust. Your grocery bill gets weird, you swap brands. Your car payment resets higher, you stretch. Your credit card minimum climbs, you pray. And then one day, nothing dramatic happens. But you look at your bank account and realize the system has you pinned. You're not saving, you're surviving. And survival has no long-term plan. That is how 85% of people end up broke. Not homeless. Broke. Broke means no resilience, no margin, no power. Broke means one decision away from chaos. Now here's the trick the system uses. It keeps the pressure just low enough that you don't panic, but just high enough that you can't build momentum. It creates motion without progress, activity without escape. And the biggest weapon in that system is the shrinking value of money. Inflation isn't just prices rising. Inflation is your currency losing weight. It's your paycheck buying less oxygen. It's the same salary with less life inside it. And the reason people get confused is because they're trained to look at averages. Inflation is down. It's moderating. It's coming back to normal. But your life doesn't run on averages. Your life runs on the bills you can't ignore. Food, housing, fuel, healthcare, insurance. Those are the real inflation categories. And those are the categories that don't politely reverse. Now watch what this does to human behavior. When people feel squeezed, they don't suddenly become disciplined. They become desperate. They grab the easiest lever. And the easiest lever is debt. Credit cards, buy now, pay later, longer auto loans, zero down refinancing, financing furniture, financing phones, financing groceries through interest. This is modern life. It's not even bad choices anymore. It's the default operating system. But that operating system has one fatal flaw. It assumes stability. It assumes steady income. It assumes no shocks. And the moment stability breaks, the entire structure snaps. Here's where it gets ugly. When households start missing payments, it doesn't just hurt households. It hits the banking system. Banks are the plumbing. When the plumbing clogs, the economy can't breathe. Defaults rise. Banks tighten credit. Credit tightens. Spending drops. Spending drops. Businesses cut staff. Layoffs rise. Defaults rise again. That loop is the danger. That loop is how a few stressed families becomes a national event. And now we need to talk about the monster behind the curtain, the government balance sheet. People hear national debt and their eyes glaze over because trillions don't feel real. So I'm going to make it real. Debt is not a number. Debt is a machine that must be fed. Every month it needs refinancing. Every quarter it needs new buyers. Every year it needs more interest payments. And interest is the key word here, not the debt itself, the interest. Because when rates rise, the cost of carrying the debt rises. And when the cost of carrying the debt rises, the budget gets squeezed, not by politics, by arithmetic. When you spend more money just paying interest, you have less money for everything else. Less money for infrastructure, less money for services, less money for programs, less money for stability. So what happens next? The system looks for the easiest escape route. And historically, the easiest escape route is currency devaluation. That sounds academic until you realize what it does to you. When the currency is devalued, your savings lose purchasing power. Your paycheck loses purchasing power. Your retirement account loses purchasing power, in real terms. Even if the numbers in the account go up, your lifestyle can go down. That's the trap. People confuse higher numbers with higher wealth, but wealth is purchasing power. Wealth is what your money can command. Now here's the part that should make you sit up. A debt this large doesn't get paid back. It gets managed, it gets rolled, it gets inflated away, it gets restructured through time, and every one of those outcomes transfers pain to the public. And you might not see a bill in the mail that says national debt payment, but you pay it anyway. You pay it at the checkout line, you pay it in higher premiums, you pay it in the cost of living. So when people ask, why does life feel harder? This is why. The system is offloading its maintenance cost onto your daily survival. Now we have to bring in the dollar itself, not the political theater around it, the mechanics. For decades, the dollar had automatic demand. Global trade ran through it. Commodities were priced in it. Foreign governments stored it. That created a constant base of buyers. That base matters because it let the US run deficits longer than most nations could. It was a cheat code. But cheat codes don't last forever. They last until the world starts building alternatives. And that is happening in real time. More trade is being settled outside the dollar. More payment rails are being built that don't require the Western banking system. More countries are experimenting with bypassing the middleman. This doesn't mean the dollar disappears overnight. That's not how reserve transitions work. They erode, they shift, they weaken at the margin. But here's the key concept. Currencies don't need to die to hurt you. They only need to lose value steadily while your costs keep climbing. If global demand softens and domestic supply keeps expanding, the dollar weakens. And a weaker dollar makes imports more expensive. And expensive imports show up in your life faster than you expect. Parts, electronics, fuel inputs, medical supplies, anything with global components. That's why the currency story is not geopolitics. It's your household budget disguised as international news. Now I want you to see the full stack. This is the timeline engine. Households, low savings, high debt. Banks, rising defaults, tightening credit. Government, rising interest costs, constant refinancing. Currency, gradual devaluation pressure. Trade, shifting settlement patterns. The engine runs until one component fails. And the problem is, every component is already stressed. So why 2027? Because people don't break on day one. They break when runway runs out. Savings are runway, credit is runway, job stability is runway. If you have none of those, time becomes your enemy. Most households have been burning runway for years. They used stimulus, they used savings, they used credit, and now the extra is gone. The next phase is not tight. The next phase is tap out. That's the difference between discomfort and collapse. And I'm telling you, we are closer to tap out than the headlines will admit. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, Jon, but if this is true, why does everything still look normal? Because systems fail in bursts. They don't fail in straight lines. They look stable until confidence cracks. They look manageable until the dominoes synchronize. 2008 looked normal until it didn't. 2020 looked normal until it didn't. And the pattern is always the same. The problem builds quietly. The warning signs get dismissed. Then a trigger hits. And suddenly what felt impossible becomes normal in weeks. Now here's a cliffhanger you need to remember. The trigger doesn't have to be huge. It just has to hit a stressed system. A wave of layoffs, a spike in energy costs, a credit event, a banking scare, a geopolitical shock that hits supply chains. Any of those can be the match. The real fuel is the lack of margin. Margin is the word that decides who survives. Margin is emergency savings. Margin is low debt. Margin is skills that pay. Margin is multiple income streams. Margin is assets that hold value. Margin is community you can lean on. Without margin, you're trapped inside the system's schedule. Now I want to address something that's going to make some people uncomfortable. The reason the 85% statistic is plausible is not because everybody becomes equally poor. It's because resilience is distributed unevenly. A small group has assets, cash flow, low debt, and options. A larger group has some savings, but it's fragile and concentrated. And a massive group has obligations with almost no buffer. When purchasing power erodes, that massive group doesn't adapt gradually. They break suddenly, they default, they liquidate, they downshift their life. And when enough people do that at once, the economy changes shape. That's why this isn't doom. It's math and behavior. Now, let's make this practical. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to position you. First, audit your survival math. Don't guess. Write your monthly essentials: housing, food, transport, insurance, utilities, medical. Now ask yourself, if income stops for 30 days, what breaks first? If you don't know, you're driving without a dashboard. Second, kill the fastest bleed. That's high interest consumer debt. If you're paying 20% plus on revolving balances, you're not using credit. You're renting your own life at a compounding penalty. Third, build a buffer. Start small, but start. A few $100s changes your psychology. It keeps you from spiraling on a surprise expense. Fourth, diversify your resilience. Resilience is not one product. It's a mix. Cash for flexibility, skills for earning power, assets that don't melt with devaluation, income streams that don't depend on one boss. Fifth, build optionality. Optionality is the ability to say no. No to a bad job. No to a bad loan. No to panic selling. No to desperation. People without optionality take the worst deals at the worst time. Now, I'm going to give you a simple timeline, not as prophecy, but as a stress map. Early 2026 feels like relief. Some prices cool, some headlines soften. People say, we're back. But the buffer is still gone. Mid-2026 is when reality creeps in. Insurance renewals jump, rent resets higher, utilities creep, and you hear the phrase, I don't know where my money goes. That phrase is a warning light. Late 2026 is where defaults start rising in pockets. Not everywhere. In pockets, credit gets tighter, businesses lose oxygen, layoffs start to appear. Early 2027 is where policy options narrow. If inflation pressure returns while growth slows, the system has to choose: defend the currency or defend the debt. And in a system drowning in liabilities, the pressure usually favors defending the debt. That means easier money. That means more devaluation risk. That means the public pays the bill again. This is why timing matters. The exit is always wider before the panic. After panic starts, rules change. Withdrawal friction, transfer limits, extra verification, longer settlement times, new reporting. It's not personal, it's system defense. Now, here's another question that matters. Are you building a life that can survive volatility or a life that requires everything to stay stable? That single question decides your future. Because the system you live inside is becoming more unstable, not less. That's what high debt and low savings do. They reduce shock absorption. Now, I want to talk about retirement for a second because this is where the illusion is strongest. People say, I'm fine, I have a 401k. A 401k is a container. What matters is what it can buy. If your account rises 10%, but your essentials rise 20%, you lost. And if you're forced to withdraw during a high inflation period, you lock in the loss at the worst time. So again, margin is protection. Now let's talk about the psychological trap. Denial. When pressure rises, people cope by pretending it's temporary. It'll go back to normal. They won't let it happen. America is different. And then they keep doing the same habits. Low savings, high spending, high debt, no plan. That's not optimism. That's paralysis. The goal isn't panic. The goal is position. Position is boring. Position is discipline. Position is preparation. But position is what keeps you alive when the headlines get loud. Now, you might be thinking, so what assets survive devaluation? I'm not going to sell you one magic answer. I'm going to give you a principle. If something is scarce, useful, and hard to produce, it tends to hold value better than paper promises when currency gets diluted. If something produces cash flow, it can outrun inflation if managed correctly. If something is purely dependent on confidence, it can crack faster than you expect. So don't chase hype. Build a mix that matches your reality. Now I want to circle back to the biggest mistake people make when they finally wake up. They try to do everything at once, they wait until panic, then they rush into trends, then they buy the top, then they sell the bottom. Preparation is boring, panic is expensive. So here's a weekly plan you can actually do. This week, calculate essentials. Cut one expense you don't need, attack the highest interest balance, build a starter buffer, do 1 hour on a skill that raises your income. That's it. Small moves, consistent moves, compounding moves. Because compounding works both ways. The system compounds against you if you don't act. But your discipline compounds for you if you do. Now let me give you the final cliffhanger, the thing almost nobody talks about. When a population gets financially squeezed long enough, the next phase isn't just poverty, it's control. Control shows up as temporary measures. Controls on spending, controls on transfers, controls on what counts as acceptable transactions, controls on what you can buy, where, and how fast. And if you think that sounds extreme, remember, controls don't start as authoritarian slogans. They start as for your safety. The people who suffer most are the ones with no margin, because margin is freedom. So your job is simple. Build margin, lower debt, build a buffer, increase earning power, diversify resilience, stay informed without panicking. Now, last thing, I want your commitment in the comments. Write one action you will take this week. And don't forget, subscribe to support the original work. And if you're part of the movement against copycats, comment Jon AG best so I can see you. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you in the next video soon.